Sure. So I'm a conventionally trained registered dietitian, and I've been in this space, the nutrition space, for this is my 23rd year. So it has been a long journey. I've always been in the weight management sphere for the most part, conventional system first, and I did some health coaching. And then I started to question things about 10 to 15 years in. I was starting to have my own health issues of constant bloating and having a lot more trouble managing my weight. I thought it was just part of aging and getting older and having kids and all of the things that kind of you hear about, you're going to get old and or sick and fat as you age. And, but not only did I have my own health crises, none of my patients, or very few of them, were seeing much healing, and they were getting progressively worse. So I thought, this is really strange. The guidelines that are in place, like all that's happening are obesity's getting worse, diabetes getting worse, all these westernized diseases, lifestyle diseases that we know are lifestyle diseases are intensifying. And what has happened? This has only been about 50 to 70 years that we've seen these really big issues. So anyway, I decided I wanted to take a step out of the nutrition field for a while. I had some other things go on with one of my children who got chronically ill when he was just 11 years old. And we were thrown into the conventional system, and he had some really intense digestive issues, and nobody was giving me any answers. Nobody was giving me any sort of answers to the questions I was asking. It was kind of like, well, just be quiet and we'll do this medication, and we'll just keep doing medications until he's in remission. And he just got worse and worse. And I did a deep dive into natural and holistic nutrition and just trying to find the natural way of healing rather than medications and, stacking medications. And, there's got to be a reason why he's ill. And so I stepped away from the nutrition field for a while and really just tried to heal him and get him better. And in that time, I discovered so much that I was never taught, and methods that actually make a difference. And I got very interested in blood sugar management and metabolic disease, because almost everybody, the vast majority of adults, have some sort of metabolic illness, or at least metabolic insufficiency, where they're not metabolizing energy optimally in the way that they should. And why is that? So kind of went down tons of rabbit holes and discovered that what I was teaching conventionally was not what actually heals people and reverses disease. And interestingly enough, it can actually exacerbate symptoms and make them worse. And so I started to look at what's behind all of this. You don't want to seem like a conspiracist or anything, but it's what's behind all of these food drivers and food recommendations, and why are we recommending things that actually make disease worse? So about 5 years ago, I started to test all of these things that I was learning about on myself. I started to do intermittent fasting. I started to, really strategically eat carbohydrates in a way that helped my metabolism rather than hinder it. And then I went on my own and started practicing online and developing courses and working with clients individually and students, and teaching them the methods that I was using in order to stabilize my blood sugars. I had insulin resistance myself, despite being a healthy weight and having healthy blood sugars, which is a very interesting thing to point out, is you can have really severe insulin resistance and still have normal blood sugars, still be a healthy weight and look outwardly healthy, but be struggling metabolically. So that was me. I didn't know that until a couple of years ago, until I learned about proper testing. And once I reversed my insulin resistance, all of the food issues that I had, and all the mentally, especially, just went away. And I was so grateful for that I decided to, I have to get this messaging out to more people and build some courses and help people in a way that mainstream nutrition is not. So that's how I got to where I am. And I'm so excited to be able to teach methods to people who are struggling with the same issues that I did.
Yeah, thank you so much for that explanation. I think from what you mentioned, there wasn't really a lot of research at that time either. You know, I'm assuming when nutritionists have gone to the guidelines that they had were also based because there wasn't a lot of research, a lot of investigation at that time, and that was why those were like the guidelines that people were following. Now it's great that we are questioning, like, is this really a lifestyle? Is this really a long-term solution, right? Because I think that right now, apart from you helping your patients get out of those chronic diseases or heal the issues that they have, it goes further than that, right? It goes into longevity. Can you tell us a little bit about what longevity is, or like the concept of, and why it's so important right now to improve our quality of life to get to that longevity? I don't know if I'm even using the term right, but you can explain it better.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started practicing, I'm going to date myself, I'm sure, but email was a thing, but we didn't have social media. There's no Facebook, there was no Instagram. Like, to get the proper word out, going back to your point, the studies weren't really there. And if they were, people just didn't know about them. And even now there's like a 10 to 14 year lapse from the time that we find research findings until it becomes mainstream. And even then, it's like, well, whatever funding is going to, bring us money with these studies are the ones that people are going to know about. So yeah, that's always something to think about also. But the term longevity is basically, the longevity of life, like how long you're going to live. That would be like the really short answer. But more importantly, looking at how do you want to feel until the end of your lifespan. So it's like we have more longevity now than we have in the past, for sure. I mean, we've increased our lifespans, but just in this next generation, even though like the next generation is actually the projected longevity is starting to decrease just because of chronic disease and illness. But like, how do you want to live? Do you want to live to be 85 and, living in your own home and feeling great until, right up until the time that you die? Or do you want to be 85 and in a nursing home from the time you're 65 on, or barely being able to move and you just have all these pharmaceuticals that are basically keeping you alive, but there's no, quality of life. So that's really the target that you want to be mindful of. But when we talk about longevity, blood sugar plays a huge role with that, and how quickly you're going to age, and blood sugar highs and lows play a huge role with that too. Anytime you get a big blood sugar spike, that can do some damage with blood vessels and mitochondria and just cell health overall. So the more that you can mitigate those, blood sugar highs and lows, the better you're going to be as far as longevity goes. So, I'm middle age. I'm definitely in perimenopause. I'm going to be 48 in a couple of months, and I just really focus on things that help me with longevity, but also help with the kind of aging in reverse, I guess, like is kind of like what I like to say. And blood sugar management plays such a big role with that. And the thing with blood sugar is, yeah, you can get some symptoms from it, like highs and lows, but a lot of times people have no idea what's going on. Like, they have no idea how they're reacting to foods. And it's just kind of this inward thing that your body will take care of in most circumstances and do all it can to keep that regulated, but you really have no idea the damage that you're doing. It's kind of like, like we all know that cigarette smoking ages us, and it ages the cells, and it does damage, and blood sugar does too, like highs, and especially highs. So if we can mitigate those highs and lows, we can definitely play into our longevity, but also keeping our cells healthy. And I specialize in insulin resistance because it's a huge problem with most westernized cultures, and adults have some degree of insulin resistance, just meaning you're not utilizing energy that you're taking in as optimally as you can, because for various reasons. But when we build up high levels of insulin over the course of our lifetime, due to eating too often, due to eating a lot of carbohydrates and sugar and processed foods that, just spike our blood sugar, over time, we're going to have high levels of insulin, and then we're going to start to develop insulin resistance in the cells, and they're just not going to utilize energy as well. And that definitely plays into our longevity. So I hope that answers your question and targeting what you were asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I also see many times you upload like stories of your own patients, right? And there are so many people that say, I feel better now in my 40s than I did in my 30s, or I feel better in my 30s than I did in my 20s. And I find that's exactly what you're saying, kind of, like aging in reverse, because you get to understand the needs of your body, which I think that a lot of people are overeating or they're eating too often. And that leads to a lot of mood swings due to glucose instability, or the glucose dips, how many people call them, and just feeling tired after a meal, or feeling tired even throughout the day, because all you're eating are like either whether it's constant snacking or snacking very high in carbs. And yeah, it's a common side effect of these type of meals. Now it's something that I think a lot of people are experiencing, that during summer they go abroad or they travel and they have these I guess we can say slips, but not really slips, just like kind of enjoying summer and everything. Don't want to guilt trip anyone on anything, but then you want to go back to feeling, energetic, and back, you're going back to work. You kind of need to start feeling energetic again. How would someone get back into that routine? And in the long term, every time you go on holiday, let's say now Christmas is coming and you already know that you're going to go home to your parents' house and there's going to be big meals, and how can we try to change our behavior or our view towards food to, during these times, remind ourselves, or kind of not have so many constant glucose spikes, and then going back to work and then you're stable, and then going back to holidays and then you're having peaks? Like, what is your recommendation for this?
Yeah, there are a lot of different strategies that you can try. And I've done, full podcasts on this. And in my courses, I have lessons on this. But I think the first thing is just to accept that this is part of life, and that you're going to go off the wagon for a meal or two, or a day or two. And that's okay. But then being able to get back on track as soon as possible, that's where people really struggle. And that's why, the concepts that I teach with blood sugar regulation, you can do anywhere. You can do them on vacation or holiday. You can do them in the summer and the winter. You can do them at work. You can do them at home. I'm just teaching you how to put together a meal in a way that's going to stabilize your blood sugar, and only eat a couple times a day. And teachers, learn how to stay full for 5 to 6 hours after a meal. Stop snacking, stop eating after dinner. I mean, really simple concepts. I'm not saying they're easy. They're simple concepts that you can adapt anywhere. So that is very empowering for people, because a lot of times we join a program, we join a course, we start a way of life that's like, okay, now I'm really on, like I'm going to be good. Now for a while, I'm at work, I'm not on vacation, I'm good. But then I go on holiday, and then, I'm naughty or I'm bad. And it's like, having that mindset is probably the most detrimental part of this, not being able to get back on track. But just learning some things like, when you sit down to a meal and focusing more on protein and natural fats and not so many carbohydrates, eating your foods in a certain order, like eating fiber or protein and fats first, and then eating carbohydrates later, like doing simple little things like that, not snacking in between meals, can really just set you up so that if you do have an off meal or you have an off couple of days, because we all do it. I mean, I go on vacation and I don't eat exactly how I would when I'm not on vacation, but just knowing the fundamentals and knowing how your blood sugar works, what causes spikes and what, helps negate them. There's so many hacks that you can use too. Like just a couple would be like apple cider vinegar before your meals, or taking the supplement berberine helps to reduce blood sugars. Just those little things you can do anywhere. But if you do go off the rails for a time, or, you just kind of fall back into some old habits, one thing that I found really helpful for my students, just as like a fallback method or coming off the holidays, is to really reduce carbohydrates for a day or two and do what's called fat fasting, where you are really increasing the fat intake that you are taking in with higher fat foods. The chocolates that you guys put out are wonderful too, because they have MCT oil. They're not going to cause blood sugar spikes. So focusing on those higher fat foods, forcing your body from carbohydrate metabolism, because usually when we go off the rails, we're eating more carbohydrate and you're just hungry and it's hard to get back on track. But forcing yourself into fat metabolism by just eating mostly higher fat foods for a couple of days, that will decrease your appetite. You don't even have to worry so much about fasting. It's just eating higher fat, healthy, natural fats. I'm not talking about, processed foods or anything, but like avocados and eggs and, your funky fat chocolates and other fats that are healthy, that will fill you up and make you feel nourished and full. Just doing that for a couple of days and then kind of just getting back in the swing of intermittent fasting and eating lower carb. That's a wonderful way. That's when any of my past students, they're like, oh, Shana, like it's been a couple of months, really tough. I'm like, do a fat fast for 2 or 3 days, get that appetite under control. And then, you can start implementing these things, because it's really hard to fast and to feel like you're doing good when your insulin levels are high, because you're going to be hungry and have cravings. So those are some strategies that you can use, but mindset plays a huge role in it too.
Yeah, definitely. I think that what we were talking about last time, that some people don't understand the concept of holistic nutrition, and they just think that it's somebody who's not a nutritionist and it's calling themselves a nutritionist, but that's not at all what it is. I mean, also, I think that there is a lack of information regarding the different types of nutritionists there are. For example, I do CrossFit myself, and I know that there are, right now I'm on a weight loss journey, so I'm going to a nutritionist who's helping me with that. Then I know so many people in my gym that are doing like a mass gain, and they're going to a sports nutritionist. I think that's what it's called, and they focus specifically on helping you in your performance. So there are a lot of types, but I think that holistic nutrition is an approach that everyone should be taking, because first of all, it's an approach that is not about dieting. So it's not a short-term, it is about dieting in the sense that it's our diet, it's the way we eat, but not in the sense that it's a short-term solution, but rather what you were saying, like relearning the relationship we have with food. And therefore, also when you go on holidays, you will realize, I think that at least that was my experience. Like you go on holidays and you already know that if you eat that, you're going to feel this way. So it's not about, oh no, I'm not going to eat that because it's carbs. It's like, I'm not going to eat that because I know that after that I'll feel bloated and I'll feel tired, and I want to enjoy the beach, and I want to enjoy later on, maybe I want to enjoy a cocktail. So I prefer to choose one over the other. But definitely, yeah, great tips. And so you said you have a program specifically on that, or is it like, which one is it?
Yeah, I have several courses that I have developed. But yeah, going back to your how there's different types of nutritionists and dietitians, it's like I was conventionally trained to be a registered dietitian. So it's a degree that you have to go and go to university or college for. And it's like we were taught like we are the nutrition gurus. Like nobody else should be listening to anybody but a registered dietitian. And it's crazy because there was such disconnect from the curriculum that I learned, like the physiology and the biology and what happens when you eat certain foods, and then stepping out into the actual dietetics field and all the dogma that surrounds all the recommendations and where they actually come from. So there's actually, you can go back and get a specialized certification as a registered dietitian now, which is an integrative dietitian certification, which is additional training. So I like that is offered. At least, rather than just having the conventionally trained dietitians. And not that curriculum is bad. It's just, it's there, you have to teach what is, in the standard of care or in the mainstream, which is why I left, because I didn't want to teach that anymore. But if I could go back and do it again, I would go into functional nutrition, to be a functional nutrition practitioner, an FMP, because they learn, what I teach now, like the base root cause of why you're having issues, kind of like a functional doctor, it's a functional nutritionist. So I love that all of those, things that are coming about. But now I lost my train of thought with your actual question. I'm trying to remember what it was after.
I was just asking about the programs that you had.
Oh yeah, thank you. So I developed several different courses. I have like a master class that just teaches you like blood sugar hacks. That's super affordable. That's a great place to start. I have like a jump start. That's a 10-day program just to get you started. With 10 days of 10 tips, like each day you work on one thing. And so what I teach is a low insulin lifestyle overall, because the vast majority of the students that work with me have insulin resistance. They have prediabetes, they have type 2 diabetes, they have fatty liver, they have polycystic ovary syndrome. All of those stem from insulin resistance, and a lot of cancer does as well. So they're trying to reverse those disease process. Oh, and obesity, of course, like that. A lot of times the underlying issue is insulin resistance. So I teach a low insulin lifestyle to help you get that insulin back into balance. And, I know you've done other podcasts, and I was on here explaining insulin resistance before. I don't want people to think that the hormone insulin is bad, because we would die without it. It's just when we eat all the time and we've eaten the processed foods that we eat too much of, the sugar, the sugary drinks, the soda, the snacks, all of that. It just raises our insulin level over the course of days, months, years, decades. And all of a sudden it's out of balance. And when insulin is high, you cannot access your stored fat reserves, which is super frustrating for people. And so they might reduce their caloric intake and not be eating a whole lot, but they're eating things that spike their insulin. They're eating often. They're not eating in a way that actually reduces their insulin hormone. And so it just backfires. And it's very, very frustrating. So I teach you how to actually get that insulin back down into balance. Intermittent fasting is a very, very potent strategy to do that, because when you don't eat, you don't spike your insulin. And then when you are eating in a way that keeps those blood sugars steady, and you don't get the insulin spike. So I have the Jumpstart, and I have a starter course that's just 3 recorded lessons. And then I have like my big program that teaches you everything that I know, basically, to your disease process back into balance and keep it in remission. Because when people are diagnosed, one thing that's very, very frustrating, and one, message that I really want to get across to people, is that when people are diagnosed with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, all these chronic lifestyle diseases, they're told that they're going to be progressive. You're going to be on medications, and you might get to the point of needing insulin. Like, this is a lifelong issue. And that is so false. And the vast majority of the time, you can reverse these disease processes with proper lifestyle and put them in remission and never have to deal with them again with the proper lifestyle. And people need to understand that, because it's empowering. They can take control of their health and their lifestyle and never have to deal with these issues again. But on the flip side of that, like I'm very prone to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. I had insulin resistance. It's very strong in my family. So if I went back to different habits that I used to have because I thought that they were healthy for me, like eating a lot of grains and eating a lot of carbohydrates and eating right when I got up because I needed energy and, eating multiple times throughout the day, I would go back to having insulin resistance and probably developing prediabetes at some point. Like I have the genetic predisposition to do that, but you don't have to develop those diseases if you don't lead the lifestyle that leads to them. So that course is called Low Insulin Academy. And that opens, I do that course live a couple times a year with a class, or you can get it on demand, all the lessons on demand at any time. So I developed that just because I want people to be able to access that information whenever they can, and to have it all in a system where they can just watch lessons and be like, okay, like that makes sense. I can apply little by little, I can apply these methods to reverse my insulin resistance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's something that in the end, what you're trying to do is educate them for them to learn how to eat and then just do it for the rest of their lives and have them avoid all of these chronic diseases that are caused by insulin spikes. The other thing that I do have to say, and I include myself in this, is that a lot of people are very impatient, like they in the sense that they want quick solutions. So I think one of the issues is that they're very impatient. They want quick solutions. But the second issue that I've heard also in the US, well, not quite sure if in the US, because I don't know if you don't have public health care, right?
No, it's mostly private insurance companies.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what happens here, for example, in most of the European Union, is that the healthcare system is so saturated. The public healthcare system is so saturated that doctors and nutritionists also kind of feel forced to, I have so many patients that I have to see. Should I give them the pill that will make them reduce their cholesterol and they don't have to come back? Or do I give them the 6-week or the 1 month or the 6-month program where I actually have to keep up with all of these clients or follow up with all of these people to make sure that they are applying the guidelines that I'm giving them? So it's like it's a combination that of the fish that eats its tail. Is that a saying? I think, right? It just keeps going. It's an unending cycle. But what you mentioned is very interesting. Like what type of genetic factors predispose individuals to insulin resistance?
Yeah, and we have the same issues in our medical system. It's very broken. So a lot of people have their own private insurance, but doctor visits, labs are still astronomical because those who don't have private insurance don't pay their bills, and the rest of them are kind of left to pick that up. So it's a huge problem. And in the conventional system here, it's like, yes, medical professionals are just trying to shuffle through as many patients as they can, as quickly as they can. They don't have time. And so it's like, and they're trained to diagnose and treat with a pharmaceutical. So that's just all they know. So it's a huge broken system, but it really goes back to what they're taught. And, same with dietitians. It's like, well, you're just teaching people what you know. It's not like you're trying to make anybody sick. But yes, and here I go. I lost my train of thought again with your question because I was going back to what you said.
No worries. Like, if there are any genetic factors, you were saying that you are predisposed to having type 2 diabetes and prediabetes.
Yeah, a lot of it's familial. So it's like my dad's whole entire family has type 2 diabetes, died of cardiovascular disease. My mom, there's a lot of cancer. There's polycystic ovary syndrome. But I knew I was predisposed to it. And both of my sisters have struggled with their weight forever. So it's like, you might look at me and be like, oh, well, how does she know about chronic weight issues? Or it's like, I know, like I'm the only one in my immediate family. I mean, not my kids or my husband, but my siblings and my parents, I'm the only one of a healthy weight. And looking at my cousins, my aunts and uncles, a lot of them have issues as well. But you also have to look at, like, my dad's family, they ate processed food all the time. Most of them smoked, and then on the other side of the family, there's a lot of alcoholism. It's like, you have to look at the lifestyle factors. But for me, my blood sugars were normal. My weight was normal. But I was hungry all the time. I was thinking about food all the time because I wasn't eating properly. I was eating way too many carbohydrates and not enough protein or fat. And that's what we're taught as women, to focus on carbohydrates. So I had to do a complete mindset shift and decide, it's like, yeah, I have these genetic predisposition. It's kind of like an 80-20 thing. It's like, yeah, the genetics are about 20% of what's going to become of you and your life. But 70 to 80% is lifestyle. So yeah, I am definitely predispositioned to diabetes. And if I led a lifestyle like most Americans, most westernized culture adults, I would develop it. No, I have no doubt in my mind, because I had high insulin. It's just a matter of time. And for a lot of people, it doesn't catch up with you till your 40s, 50s. But it's like, sadly, we're seeing a lot of ill children, especially here in the United States, babies born with insulin resistance. We used to call it, adult onset diabetes. We can't call it that anymore. We call it type 2 diabetes, because children all over the place have diabetes. And that's just not normal. It's common now, but it's not normal. So yeah, the genetic predisposition can be there, but you have the vast majority, you have the control of vast majority of what's going to come of your health and whether or not you're going to develop those health issues.
Yeah. And just to confirm, all of these things are like the fatty liver disease that you were saying, the type 2 diabetes, all these chronic diseases, they're all reversible. There's no point where you reach a point that there's no going back. They're all reversible.
For the most part, yes. The one thing that isn't reversible, so fatty liver is interesting. We could do a whole podcast on that, but it's becoming more and more common because of the excessive sugar and the excessive carbohydrates. And I'm talking about NAFLD, the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. When I first started practicing, you didn't see fatty liver unless there was alcoholism. It was like alcoholic fatty liver disease. And now I rarely see somebody with fatty liver due to alcoholism. It's almost always processed foods and sugar. So people think for fatty liver, they need to reduce their fat intake and they'll be all good. And that's what a mainstream doctor will tell you, like, reduce your fat intake and exercise. And that is not what will help you overcome fatty liver. Fatty liver is due to your liver having to process too much energy, too much carbohydrate, too much sugar. You can only stuff so much energy away in glycogen in your liver and your muscle tissue. Once that's full, your liver's got to decide. So your liver decides what to do with all this energy. And then insulin directs it where to go. So the liver is very bombarded. And so if you're taking in too much energy, it's got to convert it to fat, stuffs it in the liver, stuffs it in the organs, stuffs it in the muscle, stuffs it in adipose tissue. It'll stuff it anywhere it can to get it out of the bloodstream where it's really harmful for you. So fatty liver is becoming more and more apparent. And what's tricky about fatty liver is it's hard to diagnose. So you might have some fatty liver enzymes, which are ALT and AST, which might be different for you. But if those are elevated, that's typically a sign of fatty liver, not always. But really just getting a scan is the only way to see if you have fatty liver. There's not a lot of symptoms that come about other than the ones like being hungry and all of the ones that I mentioned with having insulin resistance. But the other interesting thing about fatty liver is that a lot of times people are healthy weight. Like they're like, oh, I don't have a weight issue, so I don't have fatty liver. But you definitely can have fatty liver and any of these chronic diseases and still be of a healthy weight. But the thing with fatty liver, it is reversible when it's in the stage of fatty liver. But if it progresses to the point of cirrhosis, where that's where the liver starts to scar over, and that happens after you've had fatty liver for a long time.
Right.
But when it gets to the point of cirrhosis and that scarring, that's not reversible.
Okay.
So that's why it's hard, because it's hard to diagnose it. And then, but it's completely reversible if it hasn't progressed to the point of cirrhosis. And once it progresses to the point of cirrhosis, the incidence of cancer goes up pretty dramatically, because your liver is just not working. I mean, your liver is so vital for so many processes. But yeah, absolutely reversible with proper diet, proper lifestyle, and just reversing that whole process. And you reverse it by doing the opposite of what got you sick in the first place.
Yeah. Oh, very interesting. Yeah, we should definitely do a podcast on fatty liver disease. Honestly, I have no knowledge of it, and I'm sure that people would love to hear about it. So we should do another one about that. I think those were all my questions. My last question is, where can people find you?
Yeah, I would love all of your listeners to follow me wherever and learn more about metabolic disease. And you know, I have people writing to me all the time, like they're just like silently doing what I suggest in the background, and then they'll be like, "Hey, I lost 25 pounds, thanks," or, you know, "I've been following you for a while and I reversed my fatty liver." It's so refreshing to find somebody who actually can help you reverse your disease process. So I'm very active on Instagram. That's just my name at shana.husson.rdn. And I put out information pretty much daily. I post what I eat a lot on my stories. People love that, because I can tell you, like, focus on protein, bring the carbohydrates down. But until you see it plated, and it's a little bit more difficult. So I'm very active on Instagram. I have a podcast called Fast to Heal Stories, where I just released 149th episode today. Hours and hours of metabolic, you know, learning their success stories and hot topics. And then my courses are at my website, which is fasttoheal.info. And I should mention, it all got started with the book I wrote called Fast to Heal, and it's available on Amazon. And I know it's a little bit different with, you know, certain countries and the shipping and all of that, but there is a download of it on my website as well.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much. I think I'm gonna share whenever I eat, because I'm having actually breakfast these days, hard-boiled eggs with cottage cheese, and it's just amazing. I actually got inspired from your stories as well, so I'm definitely gonna be sharing that, and maybe tagging you and everything. But I invite everyone to try that, because it's so worth it. And I know some people still have that stigma of like, oh, I don't know if I want to try it, but until you try it, you don't know. So definitely go for it. I will leave all the links that you mentioned in the description below. And again, thank you so much for your time, Shana.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Have a great afternoon. Bye.